Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. I'm very excited for this episode. This is episode 100 of this season, and it's the first episode of the new year. So very excited to be rocking out today. And the guest couldn't be even more interesting. So she's the founder of Juicy AF. And what she does is she helps sober, curious women create joyous, interesting, vital, alcohol-free lives. Love it for your New Year's resolutions. So excited to be rocking up today with Kay Allison. Hey, Kay, are you ready to rock?
Let's jam. Let's rock. Let's go, baby.
Perfect. So we always start off on a good note here. So tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
When I was new into my recovery from drinking, I walked into a meeting and there was this gorgeous woman who was sitting at the front of the room. She was well-groomed, wearing designer clothes, super articulate. And she told the story about being in her living room at 3 a.m. with her husband, her boyfriend, and the police, and thinking it was perfectly normal. And she threw back this glorious mane of hair and she laughed. And I was viscerally shocked because at that time I was buried under layers of shame and remorse and regret and embarrassment and denial, all with a wallpaper over the front of it that said, "Nothing to see here, pass on by." And she represented to me freedom and this sense of sparkling aliveness that I didn't know was possible. And that's why I started Juicy AF, alcohol free, of course, was to be that beacon of sparkling aliveness and freedom for other women.
Wow. Wow. That's so cool. And now, with the good note, though, sometimes there's some bad notes. And so I like to kind of tie these two together. Now, I'm sure there have been some stumbling along the way. I'm wondering, can you share something with us that didn't go as planned and maybe how we can recover from it?
Nothing has gone as planned, number one. And I've been gestating this business idea for a couple of years now, pretty much a couple of years. And it is being birthed as we speak. And there's been a lot of false starts. There's been a lot of fear. And it's been such an amazing learning experience for me because I think we all self-create these circles of fear that keep us playing small and fill us with self-doubt. And it's the best teaching opportunity and growth opportunity that there possibly is. I've learned that the key to moving through that circle of fear is to just be super honest about it and to say it out loud. When I come from a place of love and expansiveness and joy, things seem to go a lot better than when I'm operating from a place of fear and grasping.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I know that all too well being a musician because the fear is, I mean, sometimes it can be crippling, really. And I mean, what are we doing? Well, why are we taking ourselves so seriously? I mean, all you're doing is just going out and playing some music or going out and helping some people, live a alcohol-free life. Like what I wonder where that fear comes from in the first place.
For most women, and I think even for guys in today's culture, a lot of it stems from this cultural message that we've all absorbed by osmosis, which is we're not okay. We're insufficient. We're existentially inadequate in some way. I'm not good enough. I'm not thin enough or pretty enough or successful enough, or I'm too old or I'm too young or I'm too loud or whatever it is, right? But it's always that story that somehow being ourselves is inadequate. And it's fomented by the marketing industry, which I was part of for, 25 years. So now I'm atoning for all of that. But I think that that is why it's time for an alternative to 12-step programs. 12-step programs were created by men in the 1930s, where the culture was that men presented with gigantic egos. And the 12 steps are designed to puncture those egos. Where if I'm coming into being alcohol free, thinking that somehow I'm inadequate, continuing to puncture my ego only makes things worse. It is not an antidote. So, in my book and in my programs, what I talk about is, identifying that story and then creating a custom prescription, if you will, of values or principles or spiritual ideas that are the antidote. So for me personally, this ancient story that I created that somehow I'm not good enough, my custom prescription today is a sense of amusement, a lot of honesty, and some compassion.
Wow. I think you're right. I think we all sort of feel this inadequacy. And I think alcohol plays into that in a way as well, because it serves as almost an excuse for making all these mistakes, and for, I just, I had a few drinks and I, whatever, what made some mistakes. But really, that's really mainly just an excuse. I mean, you probably would have made some of those mistakes anyway, or at least the alcohol gives you it gives you a way to forgive yourself, which is great. Except I don't think you need the alcohol part to forgive yourself, do you?
Well, it's interesting, Tim. When I drank, I thought I was drunk was my get out of jail free card, but it does not work that way. I'm sorry to say it doesn't work that way. And here's where a drinking habit becomes insidious. As few as 7 drinks a week, that's one glass of wine, one regular sized glass of wine a night, or 3 drinks on Friday and 4 on Saturday. But an average of 7 drinks a week actually rewires our neural circuits. So we baseline become more anxious and more impulsive. Even when we're not drinking, we're more impulsive.
Really?
And so that means that even drinking that little, to me, that's a little, um, creates a lot of those circumstances that we feel remorse and regret over, which is the edge that we need the first glass of wine or the first vodka to take the edge off. And the other thing that happens is another neural circuit, the one that actually reinforces habits, also gets strengthened. So if you decide that the glass of wine is what you need to take the edge off of your remorse and your anxiety, that's going to become a habit way faster than you can possibly even know. And so it's this insidious, slippery slope where I'm baseline more anxious and I'm baseline more impulsive, flipping people off and saying rash things, and, all the stuff you do when you're spending too much money, all the stuff you do when you're impulsive, which sets up the edge that I then need the drink to take off. And that becomes a habit much faster than any of us actually realizes. And so it's the opposite of what I think we believe. Like, I believed it was my get out of jail free card. I believed all I really wanted was to be able to drink the way I drank and not have consequences. Also not a thing.
No.
Right? And what we end up with is this negative habit of increasing levels of anxiety and impulsivity, and a habit that is more deeply entrenched way before we realize that it's entrenched.
Wow. And you know what I find interesting too is it's actually, there's a lot of peer pressure, a lot more than you might think. I mean, if you go out and you're hanging out with friends and you're choosing to not drink that night or whatever, you get quite a few people that will make fun of you and what's wrong, why aren't you drinking, that type of thing, which is super counterproductive. I mean, the only way you can get out of that, I think, is to admit that you're an alcoholic. I think is how else do you get
No,
out of that?
it's so interesting. It's really not true. Um, I want to challenge a couple things. One is my friends and I don't drink when we go out. There is a whole way to socialize and a whole group of people that don't do that. I mean, it's kind of a newsflash, but there is life outside of sitting in a bar and drinking with friends or getting to. And the second thing is, I've created one of the modules in my program is how to handle 7 sticky situations. I was so afraid that people were going to ask me why I wasn't drinking. And what I actually found was, I think I've been asked that 5 times in the 23 years I've been alcohol free. And I have a script, I have now at this point, I have like 3 or 4 stock answers. And it can be things like, oh, not tonight. I just don't feel like it tonight. All the way to when I drink, my clothes fall off and I'd rather not have that happen tonight. I mean, it just kind of, it's good to have a few one-liners so you're not a deer in the headlights when and
Yeah.
if somebody asks.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a little bit of humor as well. And you're also not sounding judgy when you say it, like, I just think alcohol's bad. Because then you're basically telling them that they're bad, which is not what you're
Absolutely.
intending to do, right?
Exactly.
Right on. Love it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit I mean, we talked about habits a few times already. So I'm wondering, like, when we talk about practice makes perfect or practice makes progress, what does that mean to you?
Well, as I said to you before, I was a classical musician in my first iteration of a career. I played cello professionally in Chicago, and I actually went to conservatory. So I was a pretty serious classical musician. And anybody that's taken piano lessons or flute lessons or whatever will remember this scenario where you start to play a song and you get to the hard part and you mess up and you go back to the beginning and you play the song, you get to the hard part and you mess up and you do that like repeatedly. And what I learned was to take the hard part and to think about it like a knot in a chain of a necklace, where you actually have to pull the pieces apart and slow them the hell down in order to put them back together in a way that is smoother. And so, with being alcohol free, I've actually teased all of those things apart and slowed them down. There's a physical dimension of not allowing that edge to develop. There's a physical way of holding your body that's relaxed and calm and has some equanimity to it. And so I help people figure out how to practice that, how to embody that. There's an emotional component, there's a spiritual component, there's a conversational component. And to pull those pieces apart and slow them down is actually the answer to becoming adept at something and have it become second nature, right? I used to say, oh, I need to get it in my hands, right? And I find the same thing is true with business, right? Like there are certain practices in my business, certain rituals, certain habits that allow me to focus. I mean, like most entrepreneurs, I'm completely ADD. And so I do 3 things a week and I do 3 things a day. And having that focus and not, I keep a list of other stuff, but I have to get those 3 things accomplished by the end of the week, even if my house burned down. And that practice has been super helpful to me to channel all that creativity and all those ideas to go deep into 3 things instead of starting 50 million things.
Yeah, and that's what gets people overwhelmed is the 50 million things that they have to do. And really, a lot of them are probably just busy work, right?
Well, or they were decent ideas, but nothing is going to get done if you start 50,000 things. Um, I have become a big fan of the book Traction by Gino Wickman and his entrepreneur's operating system, where he talks about get your team to only do 3 things and get them completed, and then do the next 3 things. Don't have 10 projects going simultaneously. And I found that discipline to actually be more productive than the way I had been doing things.
Wow, that's awesome. And I have to say, I love your analogy about slowing things down, because that's exactly it. When you're trying to learn a piece in music, you've got to play it painfully slow so that you just teach the muscle memory. And
It's
I'm sure
exactly
it's,
right.
and it's probably works in anything, right?
I think it's true. When I was a musician, I would play just the rhythm piece with my bow hand, and then I would play the notes without the rhythm, with my left hand. And then I would very slowly put those things together and then gradually speed it up. And if I screwed up, I would slow it back down. And, it was so painstaking and painful for me. But I think if I had learned that earlier on, I think I would have been a far better cellist.
Yeah, totally. I played mostly like rhythm guitar for almost my entire time playing music. It's only been within the last couple of years that I've been playing along with learning some piano and learning some lead guitar as well. And it's a totally different thing because now you have 2 hands going at the same time.
Oh my God, what a
And
nightmare, right?
oh yeah,
I know.
yeah, the rhythm part, I mean, yeah, okay, fine, you're forming chords, but it's not the same as having both hands doing something at the same time, right?
When
And
I was in conservatory, I had to place out of a piano proficiency, and not I just could not do it for the life of me. Reading 2 stabs of music at the same time with 2 hands doing 2 things. I mean, I was that was not one of my skills.
well, there you go. So now that is now transferable to a lot of things, including business, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of who's in my band, right? Um, I have been a student of Dan Sullivan's from the Strategic Coach for a good long time now. And the philosophy that he teaches is that each one of us has a unique ability, and it's characterized by 4 things. Let's hope I can remember them. One is the most important one for me is it gives you energy. You're passionate about it. You're always learning it, and you have excellent skill. Um, and that anything outside of that, I mean, should be delegated to someone for whom that thing is their unique ability.
Cool.
And I have found that to be so brilliant because it's the analogy of having a band full of rock stars, like the Beatles or the Stones or whatever, where everybody is in and of themselves a world-class musician or a world-class whatever, and building a team of people where they are lit up more than half of the time is such a joy because everybody is just operating in this super expansive place and punching way above their weight. I mean, for me to do accounting stuff, I will only ever get mediocre and barely competent. I'd much rather spend my time writing and speaking and being in my unique gifts than only getting to mediocre. I don't like being mediocre.
No, no, I get that, and I think that a lot of people have that control issue though of thinking that maybe they can do it better, but I don't think anybody can be good at everything.
Hi, it's Mark Mawhinney from Natural Born Coaches, and I want to give two very big thumbs up to Tim Melanson and his Creative Crew agency. I have been using them for a long time, and I am 100% happy. They get the job done right, they're fast, and they let me focus on my business. I don't have to worry about anything. So again, I want to give them two very big thumbs up. I have no problem recommending them. I don't give testimonials for everyone because my name is attached to it, but I gladly do so for Tim and the Creative Crew agency. So use them, you won't regret it, and good luck.
And it's the same thing like when we talk with Beatles. So turns out Paul could do just about anything. He
Right.
could play drums very well, and he could play, but he stays in his lane because why would he not? I mean, he's got Ringo to play the drums. Why would he jump in there? And because they sound different, and when you hear him play drums, it's good, but it's not the same. And in any team, if you can, I guess, put your ego aside and realize that they love what they're doing and you love what you're doing, so stay in your lane and you can both win, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have in my journey of becoming alcohol free, I found that being very, very honest has been the key to freedom. I grew up in a family that had so many secrets, and they weren't all dark secrets, but secrets. People didn't talk about what was actually going on. And the freedom that I've gotten and the security I've gotten from being rigorously honest with myself and with other people, it's just so much easier and it's so freeing. And it's part of the way that I approach business because I'm brilliant at some things and I really suck at other things. And it's freeing. It's freeing to be able to say that because it doesn't trap me in living some expectation that I should be good at everything. I mean, it's ironic. My parents always espoused the idea of being well rounded. And I'm totally lopsided. But then I look at them and I was like, you guys were into nature and birds and wildflowers and you don't know anything about art. Come on. Who's none of us is well-rounded. And thank God. It's
Hmm.
why we need each other. Like I love the women that are my VAs because I couldn't do what they do. And I'm so grateful for them. I just find that this keeps me in flow more than operating in fear.
Oh. And you know what else too? When you're honest like that with the people that you work with, it empowers them as well. And they feel better about themselves than you coming in there and kind of like pretending like you know what they do, right? Which you might. You might have. I mean, in many businesses, especially when you're first getting started, you probably should have an idea about what has to happen in your business. But you don't need to be an expert at any of them. And then once you delegate it off, it probably is best for you to say you're the expert, right?
Yeah, it's really true. I just hired a woman who is an expert in creating online companies, digital companies. And I'm like, please tell me what to do. Please just tell me what you need from me. Give me homework and I will knock it out of the park. But for me to have to I've never done a digital business
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
I don't know how to do this.
Wow, that's awesome. So now, okay, let's talk about fans. So,
Okay.
I mean, the world with social media nowadays, I mean, there is an audience everywhere. But how do you specifically turn them from just the audience to a fan?
It all starts by the ability to walk in someone else's shoes. I call this having a fluid point of view rather than a fixed point of view. So we're having this conversation and we can see each other. But if I could coax you to come and stand in my shoes for a second, you'd see, wild turkeys in the forest outside my window. I kid you not. Um, and it opens up your mind to possibilities that you can't see from where you are. What I find is going on, for me specifically, I go on the subreddit Stop Drinking or the Peloton Sober Squad group on Facebook. And I listen to the language and I engage with people and I ask them where they're stuck and how they think about coming up to the holidays and what words that, so what's going on for them. And I give suggestions and I'm pretty active on those forums because it helps me understand what the world looks like from the perspective of somebody that is newly alcohol free. I've been alcohol free since August 9th of 1999. That's a really long time ago. And a person that's there is in a different place that I am 23 years hence. So it's super important for me to bring myself back to where I was when I was in that loop and caught, because it's not my reality anymore. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I've learned is once I can see the world through that person's eyes, I can understand kind of their narrative arc. There's a thing called Plot Mountain, which has been so helpful to me in order to not only craft the offers that I'm making, but to understand the stories. So where most people, it's like Cinderella, right? There was a before state, there was a precipitating event, there were a bunch of actions, rising actions, there was a resolution, and then there was the moral of the story, which of course is that she went on to start a successful shoe empire. And when I can understand my clients' stories that are going on in their mind, what's at risk for them? What's the precipitating event? What have they tried? Where have they failed? What resources are they considering? What's their ideal resolution? And then what's kind of their next level? What's their denouement? What's their happily ever after? Then I can make an offer that romances the problem that they have and the consequences of it, that promises that ideal resolution from their standpoint, not mine, right? And I can talk about why what I'm creating helps them avoid all the pitfalls that they've been experiencing along the way. That's the way that I do marketing.
Wow, that's so good. And I totally get it, because when we're running our business for a certain amount of time, I mean, business is all about solving problems. So the customer that you're talking to has a problem that you know how to fix, and you probably were there at some point with that same problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. And this works for just about all businesses. But you're right. Once you get so far away from that problem, now all of a sudden it's such a small problem for you now, because you've grown so much that you can have a tendency to minimize that problem for them, which is definitely not going to make them a fan, right? And, I love what you're saying. You've got to take time to get back into their shoes and have some empathy for where they're sitting right now, and recognize that they're probably going to have to go through all the same hardships in their head to get them to the point where they're actually solving that problem, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. My reality inside and outside is so different than the women that I'm helping that I have to remind myself constantly. I constantly have to put myself back in her shoes so that I'm not talking to myself. I think that that's where over the past couple of years of false starts and fear and all the rest, I've been talking to myself where I am. And this has been the breakthrough, is going back and saying, wait a minute, let's use her language. Let's talk about what she's concerned about. And that's where I'm starting to get traction.
I love it so much. That's really good. Now, let's talk a little bit about the people that you have around you in terms of even just your social circle. How do you build a supportive network around you that support your choices, especially when you're coming from a place where you probably didn't have a supportive network before, or a network that was supportive of a different habit, right?
That
Right.
that is right. I found that willpower doesn't work. There are three things that conspire against it. One is biology. We talked about part of that before. Part of it is your physical environment, right? Like if I have a liquor cabinet that's, a mile wide and, a mile
Fully
deep,
stocked. Yeah.
it's going to be tough if there's a liquor store that's on my commute, what I found. So that conspires against. And then the third thing is social. There's research that show that if 5 of your friends are overweight, you're probably overweight too. Or if 5 of your friends smoke, you probably smoke too. Same thing's true for drinking, right? And what I needed to break free of that spiral that I was in was a roadmap and a set of traveling companions. You need both. It's a whole different landscape. Like the fact that my reality is so different from yours when it comes to social things, like drinking is, I don't have any peer pressure because most of my friends don't drink, right? But I needed a roadmap to get there. I needed a roadmap to get to my level of honesty. I needed a roadmap to identify those old stories that were keeping me stuck in that drinking habit that wasn't healthy for me or the people around me. And so I really needed two things, the roadmap and the compatriots, both the people ahead of me, like that gorgeous woman telling her story, and my buds that were going through the same, holy crap, how do you do Thanksgiving? How do you do New Year's Eve? How do you do Valentine's Day without drinking alcohol?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. We mentioned some books earlier. There was a book called Atomic Habits. I'm not sure if you
I
read that
love
one.
that book. Oh,
Such a
yeah.
good book. And it said basically what you just said. That willpower is, you always think of these people that have these, you know, maybe six-pack abs or whatever it is that they have. And you think, wow, that person has a lot of willpower. They're able to stay away from whatever it is. And it turns out they don't. They set their life up so they don't have to use their willpower.
That's
And
exactly right.
yeah.
I mean, it's like they say the battle of weight is won or lost at the grocery store, not in your kitchen.
Yeah.
The bag of Oreos comes home, it's going to get eaten. I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to get eaten.
Yeah.
And the same thing's true for alcohol. When I was in my drinking habit, if I had a bottle of wine in my house, it was getting drunk and I was getting drunk. No amount of willpower was going to stop that cork from getting pulled.
I used to joke around because I love chips. Chips is my thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I would say, but I'm also a procrastinator, so I'm just going to get those chips later.
That's exactly the technique. I'm going to do that tomorrow, and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And hey, it works.
It does work. It really does. So it's time for your guest solo. So I want to know
Okay.
what's exciting. What's going on?
Well, I have two things launching. I have a book called Juicy AF, and the subtitle is Stop the Drinking Spiral, Create Your Future. It's launching January 10th. So it's by the time this episode airs, it'll be ready for pre-order on Amazon. So please go and pre-order Juicy AF. The tone of it is exactly the tone of this conversation. It's kind of fun. It's kind of smart. I say the F word a lot. And it's meant to be a beacon of hope as well as having some really practical suggestions. And then I have a 21-day alcohol-free experience that is starting January 16th. You can go to juicyaf.life/21, the numerals 21, juicyaf.life/21 to register for that. And it's an experiment. It's a chance for people to try some new things and see how they work. Because if it's not better, AF, double entendre intended, if it's not better AF, why bother? And so it's not like, oh my God, give up alcohol and forever be alcohol free or you're a bad person. It's, hey, try this on. If you're having concerns about the health effects of what you're doing, or you're concerned about your anxiety and you think stopping drinking might be helpful, come try it out.
Wow. And this community is growing too. There's a lot of people that are making this choice, right? Like, how do we find these people?
Well, during the pandemic, binge drinking actually escalated to a point where 62% of all the people who drink reported binge drinking in the previous 30 days. And I think coming out of the pandemic, I think people are like, holy crap, that got a little bit out of hand. There are
Yeah.
20 million people in America that are diagnosed with alcohol use disorder. I was not one of them. So that wildly understates the number of people whose energy is being drained by drinking, their drinking habit. And you look at the incidence of anxiety, I think the numbers on anxiety are staggering, how many of us identify with having anxiety. And really, it could be that your drinking is the culprit.
Wow. It's so intuitive too, because so many people that I choose to have a drink because of the anxiety. And it turns out it could be the cause of it. Wow.
Yeah, I know. It blows your mind, right?
It does blow your mind. And it's it's great to hear people like you go out here and actually offering some real solutions and some real support for that. So thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so excited about what I'm doing. There's nothing more magical than seeing that little pilot light behind somebody's eyes come back on.
Oh,
And then, to see their lives transform and their families' lives transform. That's what gets me. It's it's such a privileged position. It's like witnessing a birth. It gives me goosebumps every time.
wow, that's so amazing. And so tell us again, how do we find out more about this?
GCAF.life. And you can find my book there. And you can also find the 21-day program there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for rocking out with me today, Kate. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been a good groove, hasn't it?
That is right on. To the listeners, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment, and we'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.